Welcome back to the 420 Chief Podcast. Before we get started, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, share out this episode with a veteran, a family member, or anyone you think needs to hear this conversation. Every share helps us reach more people and bring awareness to the global veteran suicide crisis. I'm your host, and this podcast exists for one simple reason: to give veterans a voice. Every veteran has a story. Some stories are about combat, some are about loss, some are about the struggle to find your identity after the uniform comes off, and some are about finding a path to healing when the traditional roads just didn't work. Here we have honest conversations about these stories without judgment, without shame, and without pretending there's only one path to healing. And today we're taking that conversation across the pond. My guest today is Jonathan Whitmore, MBE, a British Army veteran with more than 20 years of military service, including 2 tours to Afghanistan and really all over the place. Jonathan is going to share his story of service, transition, struggle, and ultimately how he found healing and how he's now using those experiences to help other veterans in the UK find healing on their own. There's something that we really need to understand that I definitely want to call out on this podcast, and that is the veteran suicide crisis isn't just an American problem. This is a global problem. Different countries, different uniforms, different battlefields, but veterans around the world are facing many of the same struggles, and veterans around the world are also finding ways to help one another heal through connection, community, nature, and medicines that people have used for generations, long before modern pharmaceutical medicines existed. This isn't about telling anyone what they should or shouldn't use. It's about listening to veterans, learning from their experiences, and creating space for honest conversations about different paths people are exploring on their journeys towards healing. That's what this podcast is really all about. Whatever you're watching or listening from, keep an open mind. Listen to Jonathan's story, Johnny, as I like to call him. And remember that behind every statistic is a human being who served. Let's just get right into it. Johnny, welcome to the podcast. How are you this morning, brother?
How you doing, man? All right?
Yeah, I'm doing amazing, doing even better now. I've been really excited to go live on this interview because one of my passions is really interviewing veterans from other countries who served in the military. And so it's truly an honor when you reached out, or we got put together on LinkedIn. Someone said, you guys should talk. He's got a great story. And then after we connected, hearing what you've been through and what you're doing, I was like, wow, this is truly an amazing story. So thank you for being here today, brother.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, Richard put it together, and it's great to hear that. It's a great and a shame that we've all got the same story, right? We can relate, but it's a shame that we've all got the same story, both sides. Similar stories in war and similar stories treated when you get back as well.
I'm grateful that we're sharing those stories out loud so that other people can hear them, so that they'll resonate with other people and they'll realize that they're not alone. And they've definitely got options, much safer options that have existed forever. So I don't want to take too much time on that. I do want to jump into a little bit about where you're from pre-military, and then what was it that really attracted you about the military to make you join?
So I'm from a small town in the Midlands, a place called Hinckley in Leicestershire. It's really only famous for 2 things: Hanson cabs and Triumph motorbikes. They're both forms of transport to get the fuck out of there. So I joined the military because there isn't really much to do there. A lot of my friends around that time joined the military. No, I don't know really why I joined the army. Not a lot of sort of family history in it. My granddad was in the Navy during World War II. He was actually on the landing craft on D-Day. So for your viewers, if you've seen the film Saving Private Ryan, I'm sure they have. On that, where it shows the US Coast Guard taking the guys to the beach, it wasn't actually the US Coast Guard. It was Royal Navy soldiers taking those guys to the beach. My granddad was one of them. yeah, so that was only my real sort of close connection. I had an uncle who was in the army as well. My dad's restorer of antiques, arms and armour. So he was a gunsmith in the UK, which is quite weird. So yeah, we have got guns in the UK, a lot less than when I was a kid, but we do have them. So I think growing up around the guns and like military history, only child as well. So looking for that sort of sense of belonging, I think that's what put me towards the military. My parents weren't too pleased with it, so they refused to sign the paperwork when I was 16, because you have to have parents' permission to join at 16 here. So I waited a couple of years and joined up at 18, so 2004, and I joined the Royal Corps of Signals, going in for communications. And I picked that just because at the time it was sort of computers were the future, internet and all that was coming in. And also I picked my trade because I got my lorry license out of it and got a few driving licenses. So yeah, joined the Royal Corps of Signals, went through training, and then my first unit was down in Blandford, training in Blandford, phase 2 training, and then posted from there to my first unit in Bulford. Pretty much first unit was just getting drunk and enjoying myself as a buttfuck private, buttfuck ciggy. Had a great time there, made some great sort of lifelong friends. Finished that time and we posted to 22 Signal Regiment with my squadron, essentially formed a new regiment to start going out to Afghanistan. So started taking the army a bit more seriously after that. Started getting myself a little bit fitter. I attended the Lance Corporal promotion course there and came top student on that, so got promoted to Lance Corporal. And then went on my first tour of Afghanistan. That job was based out of Bastion in Helmand province, and I bounced around a little bit all over the place doing little jobs. I was working on a piece of kit called Pike that was a spectrum analysis piece of kit. Bumped into the Americans a few times, bumped into your guys. I was down in Fob Robinson, and I worked in the American compound there. Was amazed by the fact that I walked out of our cookhouse where we were eating noodles and ration packs, and you guys had like steak and lobster Fridays, and yeah, it was like we had like an RLC guy, logistics guy based with them, and he'd like come running over and bring us like hazelnut lattes and stuff when I was working with the para guys in some of your sangers. Yeah, so that was my first tour, and on that tour I really sort of decided, well, it was the career for me. So I came back from that tour, and I went and did on that tour I did it on that time in Fob Robinson, I think it was. I met a guy working with the 216, which is our airborne squadron, the Royal Signals Airborne Signal Squadron, and spoke to him about doing P Company, which is our airborne selection course to earn your Maroon Beret. And I said to him, I'm thinking about going and doing this. And he said, fuck off. Come and speak to me when you put the application in. And I was like, right. And he was like, what I mean is, once your application's in, you're going. People always talk about, I'm going to do this. Don't talk about it. Put the application in, then you're going. Right, then you'll force yourself to train, and then you'll do it. Yeah, and that guy was that was fundamental to a turning point in my sort of how I took the army. And I put my course app in when I came back from there, and I went and did, and I passed P Company after that. That guy is a guy called Stevie Dunn, and he was unfortunately killed on his next tour of Afghanistan. But he's a guy that I've always remembered. I didn't know him really well, but it was just something that really stuck with me throughout my career. And I went on to do another couple of other selection courses, and it was very much my sort of. I came to call it my fuck it factor, the fuck it zone. If you put it in, you've got to go and do it now. So it pushes you on. Yep. So I came back from that tour. I went and did P Company, and then I was posted again, and I went up to 2 Signal Regiment up in York, and went to go and do another tour of Afghanistan. And this one was a force protection tour. So because this was 2000 and 10 time. So a lot of the guys, our army's not as big as yours, and once you've got all the tour dodgers out of the way and all the people that are injured and all the people that don't want to go and like all of that, the same sort of people are going often. And this was when we were busy on that rotation. It was people were getting literally like 6 months on, bouncing back onto tours sort of thing. So they'd got signal regiments up doing the sort of force protection jobs up in Kabul. So we were up doing that job. So that was patrolling around the city, taking people around from place to place, guarding the camp and things like that. The around the airbase that had eventually, obviously, become big news when we pulled out. And we were based at a Camp Suta. So I went and did that job. The great part of that job was getting to do like the soldiering beat up to it. We did the full infantry beat up for it. Be acted as part of a multiple, and I was a brick commander. So a brick's a 4-man patrol. We worked as a 12-man multiple, and we were also a mixed force of Royal Signals and a few other sprinkling of other cat badges. But we also had QGS with us, so Queen's Gurkha Signals. So in my my brick was two brick guys and 2 Gurkhas. So I had Sully Pun and Mohan Gurung working with me. So I got to command 2 Gurkhas in my patrol, train with them, patrol with them for 6 months in Afghanistan. That was really sort of like a highlight of my career, sort of soldiering with Gurkhas for a good period of time. Yes, they're as legendary as they make out, sort of as the legend makes out. They're a great bunch. So yeah, that was my second tour of Afghanistan. And by now, I'd like, the good thing about the Royal Signals with us is because we an annoying thing is we post every 3 years. I'm not sure how you guys work.
Yeah, it's usually between 2 and 4 years we'll rotate out.
Yeah. So we, at the time, we were posting every 3 years, and you either got into sort of a specialist niche role, or you were going on the Herrick rotations. And once you'd done a couple of Herrick rotations, the jobs were very similar. Or because Iraq was really quiet at the time, and I wanted to do something different. So when I came back from that tour, I'd put my paperwork in to go and be an instructor, so like a drill instructor for your guys,
right?
Because I'd actually selected for promotion to corporal just before I left, sort of going away. So while I was away on that tour, I got told that I was going to be going away going back as a DI, which a drill instructor, a section commander, which was great, because from the start that was something that I'd wanted to do. Like going through basic training, you see the section commander and you're like, that's the bod I want to be. And then you get back there and realize he was hungover most of the time, probably.
Right. Well, Johnny, I think one of the big takeaways from that I remember was in boot camp, it taught you who you wanted to model yourself after, like who are the squared away people and who are the people I should probably avoid. And you could tell almost by looking at them, just by the way their military bearing, the way they carried themselves. And the RDCs, for me, our drill commanders, they were squared away, but they were fucking mean, but they kept us like super shit hot. And so to me, it's like I could always look forward or look up to them because I know they wouldn't guide me the wrong direction. They're just brutally honest.
Yeah, and it's having seen sort of how your guys do basic training and how you do leadership, or how your doctrine is for leadership. I find ours is very different. And you say that, like, I remember one of my section commanders in basic training was a guy called Adam Proud. He was from my hometown, and he was the brother of a kid I went to school with. He was a parachute regiment guy. People will know him if they've ever worked for Parachute Regiment or his battalion, because he's quite a well-known guy. And he was sort of, the Parachute Regiment are a little bit different. They're not rigid, but they are rigid, if you know what I mean. They're rigid about the right things, but they're lax with the right things as well. And again, I think that shaped my idea of what sort of leadership looked like and what a good soldier looked like going through. I mean, I already had that idea anyway. I've always had an affinity for scruffy riflemen. I don't know if you've ever worked with the rifles in the British Army. They're a regiment of sort of tramps that are very good, but they are scruffy and trampy, and they take pride in it. And they have a have you ever seen the TV program Sharp or heard of it?
No, I don't think so, but I have worked with some of the British guys in Kuwait. There was a few of them over there that worked on the oil platforms with us, and then they would pull into port where we did the harbor security or the port patrol
Yeah,
guys. Yeah.
yeah. No, there was an old sort of TV show about set in the Napoleonic Wars about a rifleman, and they sort of worship this guy if they're in the rifles. Yeah, so I think that sort of took on how I wanted to be as a leader as I went forward. So yeah, so I did the second tour of Afghanistan, and I came back and took my sort of posting to the training regiment, and that again sort of shaped my career going forward, because I really enjoyed that, and that lit up my second passion, which was like coaching and mentoring and really sort of shaping other people. And I saw a lot of the two things that I really hated, which was just sort of like the shouty noise, haircut, neck shaves for no reason. You know what I mean? Just we do it like this because we do it like this. I hate that.
Tradition.
Yeah. Like there's a place for tradition, like, but just bullshit for bullshit's sake.
Yeah,
Like
there's
if
a
it,
lot of that too.
I like if a recruit could ask an instructor, why do we do it like this? I like the instructor to go, well, we do it like this because of this. Or I like to be able to explain to a recruit or somebody, this is why we do it. And I also hate well, it happened to me, so I'm going to do it to you. That sort of, that's the an eye for an eye will make the world blind in the training sort of establishment world. But as a training instructor, as a corporal, we go there as a section commander. You can't have that much impact, but you can spend your time with your section and put a lot of extra time into you guys, and that's what I did, and you get a lot back out of that. And I learned a lot in that sort of 2 and a bit years when I was there, and you get a lot of responsibility because you're with those people for what's from like 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, sometimes until sort of 11 at night for the 12-14 weeks that they're there.
Right.
And so you really get to know them, and in that time they're having some of like the worst times of their lives. Like in my time in training, I've had to tell people that their dads died. I've had to sort of deal with when they've had like breakups of long-term like marriages, or when they've had sort of kids be ill, and then you then also have to deal with the other side of that, where you've got some unthinking people above you who are just like, tell them to man up and get on with training. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
love the leadership aspect of it. It's different to look at that side of it when you have just been a recruit, you know. So it's
yeah.
interesting to hear that from the other end. Johnny, what did you do after your drill instructor job?
So after that, once I'd had that sort of taste of sort of responsibility, if you one of the things that I
Down for a second there.
sorry,
You're back now.
Back now, so yeah, so once I had that taste of sort of responsibility, I couldn't just go back to a Green Army job of going back into that cycle. You know what I said? Like it'd be pretty similar. So I put in for selection for for one of our specialist units. And that was a unit called 299 Signal Squadron. And we worked for the Foreign Commonwealth Office, which is, I'd say, a State Department. So in charge of foreign policy, British foreign policy overseas. It's a 6-month long selection, pretty hard. We had a good dropout rate sort of thing. And yeah, went through that selection, ended up as top student on that, and then spent the next sort of eight years of my career in that unit, deploying all over the place. Went out to West Africa, East Africa, Middle East, Caribbean, bit of time in Europe. That's where I got my MBE. I was made an MBE, so member of the British Empire. So for a guy from a school in special measures in Leicestershire, not bad. And yeah, it was a great time. It was a great little unit to work at. It was like the sweepings of the Royal Signals. It was the guys that didn't fit in places. It wasn't really what you'd expect.
Misfits.
The misfits, yeah, definitely the misfits.
Tell us about your mission a little bit with that unit, so that some of our listeners can get a better understanding of what kind of work you were doing there.
So it's to provide communication support to the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, as it is now, because they merged with with another department a few years ago. So essentially, we just provide comm support and technical support to diplomats overseas. Generally, it's going to be a smaller mission, a smaller station. So generally, you end up doing anything with a plug on it. So I used to like, you end up fixing all sorts of stuff. Like I was in Somalia, and I ended up sort of bartering, getting anybody who's been out to Africa, like Africa, will know the satellite dishes, the TV stations out there, getting the new one of those from Bakara Market from like a dodgy bloke I knew who actually used to be Royal Signals, who worked in a bar, and getting a dodgy Italian Spec Annie to point it and get the satellite dish working, because the compound manager we had, a guy whose nickname was Hodor. You can, if anybody who's watched thinking,
Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones, had got up there and fallen through it, and then had tried to point it with his eyes back up at the sky and get it working. And I had a compound full of steely-eyed dealers of death that wanted to watch the football. So you get put in charge of anything with a plug on it in those sorts of situations. But it was an interesting job where you got to do lots of interesting things. And that photo that you put up was where I got invited to an American beach party for the 4th of July.
And the photo he's wearing Ranger panties, which I'm actually wearing some right now too, Johnny. And I actually have a pair with the American flag, but he's wearing a pair of Ranger panties with the his flag.
Yeah, and a T-shirt with the Queen on it, wearing Union Jack sunglasses that says "Happy Treason Day, Ungrateful Colonials." And I was at a 4th of July party for the US as a British diplomat overseas at the time. And it was that I can't tell you much about the job side of it, but the opportunities to go over there. Like I was out in the Caribbean, and went out to Jamaica, and I'll have to find the photo out to show you, but there was a point that was the highest man in Jamaica. Me and a guy, one of the guys out there, we went to stayed up in a little Rasta commune up in the mountains, and ran up to the highest point in Jamaica, up in Blue Mountain Peak. And up there they've got a triangle, like a trig point. So I climbed up to that. So at that point, I was officially the highest man in Jamaica. I was still serving at that point, so I hadn't sort of succumbed. But it was just a foreboding experience. Perhaps that was when the lightning struck me for the future.
Right. Johnny, there's one thing when we had talked previously, you'd mentioned to me, and that is before you'd even got out, you started asking for help. You started to notice things weren't right with you. Have you gotten to that point yet? When you were with that unit? I wanted to kinda work that in so people can understand your journey fully.
Y Yeah, so obviously as with everything, it's our loved ones that notice first, like, so I've been with my wife since before I joined the army, so, like, since I was 16, and my wife started sort of noticing after my, like, 2 tours of Afghan when I was a training instructor. She started noticing I was getting a little bit short, a little bit sort of angry, but just put that down to a bit of stress, you know what I mean? And I think at that point it was, because like my tours of Afghan hadn't been like what you call punchy. You wouldn't They weren't like contacts and all of that stuff going on all the time. It was just um, yeah, they weren't really that bad. So um, my time at Purbright was more stressful, more sort of constant stress, and then I had my selection was a bit of stress, and yeah, I think it was just more constant sort of stress, and then going out on doing a lot of operations, a lot of deployments with the unit, um, a lot of back and forth, a lot of changing of target or who you're focusing on, what you're focusing on, really twists your melon, as they say. So the first time I really asked for help was sort of 2018 time, and it was following the suicide of a friend. And you talk about suicide. I've got his photograph up above me. Sergeant Fraser Sterling from the Royal Irish. Yeah, and I was deployed at the time. I was seconded at the time overseas, and yeah, I got a phone call to say that he'd committed suicide um, from his fiance, and then I went off and carried on working, and that wasn't sort of that's not a normal reaction for somebody to do. But like when I sat down and looked at it, I was like, um, it's that easy. You know what I mean? And I realised at that point I'd been sat drinking whiskey and staring at beams, listening to sad songs for a long time, going, "You could fucking hang yourself off that." You know what I mean? Like, or you could that trains coming were getting a bit twitchy, and I was like, "It's that easy." And my friend had showed me that it was like that easy, and that was the point that I was like, "I really need to go and get help." So my boss at the time was fantastic with it. I was working for a civvy, surprisingly, so they were great about it. Yeah, and I went and got help through the military, and it was just speaking to a therapist, got given a few pills, um, and it got me to the end of that sort of job. It got me an MBE, which was great, and then at the end of that job, I posted back to into the unit, got home, and sort of thought, well, the stress has gone. Perhaps I'm better. So sort of came off the medication, and sort of it held firm for a while, and then COVID hit, and I was a manager at that point, like an ops manager, and I was managing guys that were all overseas from my living room, and then sort of like walking out and sort of dealing with the family, and everybody knows what it was like locked up perhaps with the family. Um, but what I was doing was like I had like 30 odd guys that I was managing. So I went from sort of manage them in person, and I always say that like special communicators, that's our like designation or MOS or whatever you want to call it. Um, we're like the proper sort of princesses, first world problems. They all have proper first world problems when you manage them. And yeah, so I'd sort of if I spent an hour speaking to one of my guys during COVID, and I did an hour a day, it'd take me like over a month to get to the end of speaking to them. And you take a little bit of that on yourself. And when you're not feeling great and you've not got rid of all of that and you've got it all built up behind you, it piles on you again. So eventually I spanked in again, asked for help. And this time I got through to DCMH, which is our sort of army wide mental health team. And I thought, I've cracked it here. And I get put through to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist was just an arsehole, to be honest. And this is where I'm starting to to figure out that perhaps not everybody's got your interests at heart. Perhaps everybody has got their own ego, they've got their own interests, they've got their own bills to pay, they've got their own boxes to tick. Some people are just coasting, no matter what you do. And this is one of the things I've figured out throughout my career, working with like everybody. You can't put things on a pedestal. Like, you work with any unit, right? And there's arseholes in all of them. There's people who've made it, and you're like, how the fuck have you got in it? I mean, there's a big thing in the US going on a bit about the SEALs at the minute. Like, loads of people are finally coming out going, bunch of fucking cowboys, man. And yeah, you can find that. So I spoke to this psychiatrist, and he's sort of like, I say, look, I can't tell you about it, because this was during COVID, over an open phone line. I'm like, I can't tell you about some of the things that are bothering me. And he's like, well, I used to be a wing commander in the RAF. I'm like, I don't fucking care what rank you used to be. That's not why I can't tell you over this open phone line, and the fact that you know what I mean. So that sort of stunted my attempt to get help at that point, because I was essentially told, well, either you get better or we will just sort of medically discharge you at this point. So at that point, I got better, essentially, and went back into the army. So they will nudge and wink you along if they can.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if your guys' experience with the military over there is the same.
It's very similar, Johnny. It's very similar, especially as far as the treatment's concerned. But I think that we're afraid to even get help, especially as it pertains to mental, because especially as you get closer to retirement, you risk being medically discharged and not getting your full time in. So a lot of people, that'll hold them back from reaching out for help, or they'll tell them, you're fine, get better, like kind of like you, and it's like, okay, and just keep going. That's another one of those things. Like, even Doc Ray got blown up, a metal door wrapped around his body, and they're like, "Well, get up, let's go, you big dummy," and he's like, I think I'm really hurt here, but just carried on, and it's a lot of that, a lot of misdiagnosis, and kind of like you had alluded to, we've got a lot of folks that have experienced um, with their doctors that it's just, like they feel like another number, like they're just a check in the box, and that the doctors sometimes don't have their best interest at heart. Now, I've heard stories on the opposite end of that. It just really depends, I think, on where you go. But more often than not, either way, the diagnosis is the traditional route, because our doctors aren't allowed to refer, natural options. A lot of the time, it's just, the pills. And as we know, if you're going in for help like that, your biology's probably all messed up. So those pills aren't going to work the right way, anyways. And that's really something that we found increases the likelihood of suicidal ideations, because they're taking these medications and they're having an adverse effect, not doing what they're really supposed to be doing. And, I'll stop there. But yeah, very similar situation here in the United States. And I think that's why I've heard it from you. I've heard it from New Zealand. I've heard it from Canada. That's why there's such high veteran suicide rates globally.
Yeah, and the second time I was off sick, well, the second time I put my hand up, I had some like time off work sick, because the first time I carried on working. The second time I had some time off work sick, and a second close friend committed suicide during that time. W01 Dasdale, Royal Signals guy. Both those guys I worked with when I was at Burbright the first time as a section commander. And because of that, when I had to, I picked up my warrant officer, so I'd become a W02 sergeant major, and I wanted to go somewhere. I was going to go and be a squadron sergeant major, and I'd been told, like, I'll go to the field army, go to be to the field squadron, but I picked to go back to one squadron at Purbright, so where I'd been when I'd met Daz, and where I'd met Fraser, and where I'd been when my wife had identified that I'd started sort of kicking off a little bit, because I was like, well, there has to be something there that, like, you know, like I could go and sort of try and help. Because yeah, it's a stressful place to work, and it's a place that needs good leadership. So and I also enjoyed the training, and I think you get out of training what you put into it. So if you have good instructors, then you have good recruits and you have good soldiers. So yeah, post the second time going sick, I went back into the army as a sergeant major, and I went back to Purbright as a squadron sergeant major. But this was after, now I was going back to the greenest of the Green Army, having spent 8 years as a bloke in civvies, cutting about, doing what I want. Like in my last job, I remember
growing out your beard.
Yeah, like I'd basically cut about, essentially dressed like this. I remember it being in like jeans and flip flops, coming into like HQ in Cyprus, and the 2IC of the island stopping me with a group of other officers, and Polly Perkins, I can't remember what she was at the time, group captain, maybe she was like really high ranking RAF, she's a fantastic person, but all these officers stood around her, and she stopped me and she was like, Johnny, I wish I could get away with being dressed like that. And I just went, well, who's going to stop you, Mum? And just like walked off, because she was always in her office. But I went from like being like that to sort of a training establishment where haircuts and neck shaves were my bag. And yeah, it was a harsh change, and yeah, probably not the best for me. But I did enjoy my time there. I enjoyed turning out recruits, and I did it to the best of my ability. I had a rough roll of the dice, I think, with some of the people that I worked with, and yeah, eventually it came quite clear that one other big change was I was married and accompanied at that point. So my wife lived at home and I worked away, because we'd bought and settled here, because we'd been in the same place for like 8 years. I mean, I'd been deploying out overseas, but my wife had settled. She had friends and stuff. She'd started working in the same place. The kids had got friends at school. So yeah, I'd coming back and going back and living in the mess as a sort of 38-year-old guy, just sort of staring at the ceiling. I was pretty physically injured, pretty mentally injured, not in the best frame of mind. The mess was just outside my door, so a good cheap pint wasn't far away. My fizz became sort of walking to the shop that wasn't far away to grab sort of a quarter bottle of vodka, some juice, and some food for the night. And I'd put some squash and some vodka in a Camelback and sort of jog back drinking that, eat some food, go to the mess, you know what I mean? Just to sort of numb it a little bit. And it was just becoming clear that it wasn't a healthy cycle. And all I was trying to do was kick the can along the road so that I could get back to my previous unit, to be the regimental sergeant major, and try and sort of, I was just, you know, like what I mean, like just grasping for that last thing, that last shiny badge, that last sort of button, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing? What am I doing? What am I, like, when's enough enough? And I was with, and it was kind of like a fucking, you know, Lieutenant Dan moment. A friend of mine, I was going to a motorbike rally because I ride motorbikes. Going for a motorbike club, sort of. I was in a motorbike club, and I'm joining another motorbike club now. But when I was in the previous motorbike club, I was driving a brother up to a do, and he has PTSD as well. And he said to me, he realised, and he told his therapist that he joined the army to die in battle. And he'd come from sort of like a family with like poor family background on that. And I was like, fuck, yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe like nothing could be enough in the military if I've missed my chance to go to Valhalla, you know what I mean? And I was just sort of like, yeah, this is, I'm not sort of, I need some proper help here. So eventually I spoke to my missus. I was like, no, I need to, I'm done. Like, stick a fork in me. I'm proper fucking done here. But I've always been one about sort of integrity. And I always said to my guys, like, and girls, like, if you're struggling, come and speak to me. Like, and I always checked in on my welfare of my people, and I was always, I've always been somebody that believed that leaders should be looking down to make sure that they're doing their job right. I hate people that are always looking up to see what they're going, like, if they're doing their job right. You know what I mean? Because if you're in
Yeah,
a pyramid and you look
leader
up,
has to care about their people. That's a part of
yeah,
your people, care about your people and take care of them. But yeah,
yeah. So when I remember the day that I went in and told the boss that I was going sick, and I came out, and one of my troop sergeants was coming in, and he saw like me. He was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I said, I'm done." And I was open with it with my squadron. I let them all know what was going on. My OC was like, "Oh God, what are we going to tell everybody?" And I was like, "Tell them the truth. Tell them that their sergeant major, who's done sort of loads of tours and has been under loads of stress and stuff, is ill, and it needs to sort of take time off to recover. He's asked for help no end of times, and that help has not been forthcoming. This is what happens." So yeah, so I took that time off, and ended up medically discharged a while later. Um, but yeah, the therapy during sort of getting out was a bit of CBT, talking about it, and eventually I got through to a decent psychologist, um, who was like, "Yeah, this is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's going to take time. You need," and we talked through the sort of things that would help. And so, being a SEER instructor when I was in the military for my unit, even though I was an urban SEER instructor, urban was my speciality. I've been out in the woods and doing sort of bushcraft, things like that. So we bought some woodlands, and just the sort of getting people out into the woodlands, getting them around a campfire, uh, was sort of part of the therapy. My wife is forest school leader, so she gets kids out doing that sort of thing, teaching. She does everything from sort of arts and crafts in the woodlands to getting kids like reception school age started fires and all sorts. So really just sort of starting them young. And along with that, I started looking at, because the pills have never really done much for me. You know what I mean? They just eventually they just numb you. So I started reading other stuff. So I read a book called Through the Smoke by Professor David Nutt. He's a guy that the British government hired to be their drug czar. And essentially they said, "Look, we need to see what you want to do about your drug policy." And he went away, did all this stuff, and he came back and he's like, "Well, first of all, what you need to do is legalize cannabis, and then what you need to do is sort of look at legalizing this." And they were like, "No, not like that," and sacked him. So he then released all of this stuff. So he released a book called Through the Smoke, and he released another one that I can't quite remember. And then I read a load of other books. There's another book called How to Change Your Mind, The New Science of Psychedelics. Um, and I looked at all this and I was like, this sounds like something that is the way forward. It's based on something and it makes sense. You know what I mean? And I read about, as soon as I read about the endocannabinoid system, I was like, yes, that makes sense. Yeah, we've evolved alongside this plant that can help. So I tried cannabis for the first time and instantly felt that relief. And I was like, yes, why is this not out here? I instantly stopped giving a shit about the legality of it in any way, shape, or form. And started thinking, well, veterans need to have this, because I think I've know, like I said, I know Daz and Fraser. That Fraser was definitely drunk when he committed suicide. I think Daz has had a few beers. I know alcohol is involved in a lot of suicides, and I think that if the guys were stoned, they wouldn't commit suicide, because I've never had a single sort of. I've never smoked a joint and looked at a fucking beam and gone, I could hang myself off that beam. I've looked at it and gone, I could probably do a decent yoga move off there, and that might take the knot out of my back and improve my day. You know what I mean? So I think if all we can achieve in the UK is get veterans to switch from beer to cannabis, then we've won. We've done something great, and I think the veteran suicide problem would decrease drastically.
I agree with
Yeah,
you 1,000,000%, Johnny. I think that's something that we're finding here when we find healing is when veterans get together, at a meetup around a campfire for whatever reason. Sometimes it's hunting, sometimes it's fishing, sometimes it's, cannabis. But I think that once we get together and we share our stories in a safe place without the alcohol and we talk about the things that make us feel better, whether it's our exercise, our diet, our form of healing, in this case, cannabis, I've interviewed others that talk about their usage of ketamine, ibogaine, ayahuasca, psilocybin, and how that's helped them with these breakthroughs that they weren't receiving in counseling. And I myself have had those experiences, but for me, what opened my mind to even exploring those as alternative options, or I call it original healing options, was cannabis. And when I learned how to intentionally use cannabis for my benefit, whether that was for pain relief and inflammation. A lot of the anxiety was a big one for me. Sometimes I just needed focus, energy, and sometimes just to get to sleep quickly. And cannabis did a lot of that for me when I started to, learn about the terpenes and which strains were best for me. Because not all of them were. Some of them would keep me awake at night and or give me anxiety, but then again, on the opposite end of that, some of them would hit just right and allow me to go right to sleep.
yeah. Well, that you say about that. So, in my sort of right, I need. Where is this? Like in the UK, like we've got coffee companies, right? We've actually t-shirts. Like if you've brushed past the SF in your career, you get out and set up a t-shirt company, right? So, but where is the veteran cannabis company? Something that's actually useful to us. So I know I'd got to know a guy, absolute legend in the UK, a guy called Freddie Fellows. He's the guy who the music festival are going to this weekend that I was talking to you about. He owns the land that that's on. And at one of his festivals, he introduced me to a guy called James, who's a Canadian guy who he runs. This is 4C Laboratories, they're a cannabis company up in Canada, and he set up Emerald Clinic in the UK, which is a cannabis clinic. And he introduced me to him, and I said about how I was trying to get this, wanted more sort of veterans to get cannabis because it's a vital medicine for us. Like all of the things that we struggle with, arthritis, sleep disorders, PTSD, all the trauma related things, like it's just that, like even the neuroplasticity of going from the highly rigid sort of career in the military, transferring to a new environment. Like I always say, like I feel like an alien. Like I'm transferring from like cities have got a completely different language. They have a completely different rhythm. They're sort of like it just all feels off. You know what I mean? And cannabis is something that over the short term helps your neuroplasticity. It helps you change. Um, and yeah, so I got speaking to him, and he I'd actually pitched to a couple of the other like companies, like I did to Curaleaf, which is one of our bigger ones, but they're sort of ran by a Russian oligarch at the top, whereas James has set this company up, and he's like you, he knows what all of the terpenes are, and he's curated sort of all the strains and all the flowers. He has ADHD, and a lot of those same terpenes transfer across to sort of PTSD as well. So he's been recommending a lot of his strains for me, and they are fantastic compared to sort of like if you're buying street weed or anything like that, which is unfortunately like in the UK still pretty much the only option a lot of people have got. And he's been doing loads of tests on that, and yeah, the amount of heavy metals and just shit that you find in it is terrible. But compared to the stuff that he's bringing across, so like 4C Labs supply a lot of the big companies, but he really wanted to sort of control his own his own destiny with it. You know what I mean? Instead of just trying to sell the most cannabis to people, because that's what it really is. Because you can't have it recreationally in the UK, people are going out and get it. It used to be like California used to be, you know, with like everybody had a card for cannabis for something. Everybody had glaucoma, or everybody had a bad back, or you know what I mean?
Right.
That's what big companies are trying to do. They're just getting people in to do it. Whereas he's trying to more curate it so you get the right medicine that you want for you. And so his big focus is women's health and veterans health at the minute. We've got guys who've worked with veterans before, so worked in the military as doctors. We've got a gynecologist on staff. We've got a psychiatrist on staff. So it's really well set up. And we've got me as the veterans ambassador, so that like I'm directly available for any veteran that's coming in to talk to about the whole process, about how they can do it, and we're looking to set up and build a veterans community around this sort of whole healing. So we're at a music festival this weekend to do an event and do some promoting and try and sign people up. But in that area, we're going to look at doing pretty much exactly as you say, like a weekend where we're going to have a yoga sessions, and we're going to, because that's what I've found with cannabis as well. It opens up the space to do those other things that help you as well. So like having the cannabis has helped me to do my meditation. It's helped me with doing things like yoga and improve my flexibility, because I can concentrate to get into the positions. And I also now am more in tune with my sort of nervous system to know which bit needs stretching a little bit better, right? And that's the science behind that is because my endocannabinoid system, which is about knowing balance, about creating balance in my body, is going, this you need to work on this bit, mate. You need to know what I mean. So teaching guys that, teaching them that by a campfire, and what I'll say is there's another great book called "What It's Like to Go to War." It's about a guy who went to Vietnam. He was a platoon leader in Vietnam, and what you say about the ceremony of things as well. He mentions that, and also being by a campfire, looking at the flames puts your brain into that flow state. The randomness of it puts your brain into a flow state, so it makes it easier for you to open up and tell those stories and process those things. So that's what you're creating there. You are creating essentially that tribal sort of sense of you just
Camaraderie.
yeah,
That
you
camaraderie, that sense of support. It's funny you say that, Johnny. I've actually got an event today. I'm leaving my house after this interview and meeting up with a group of veterans that had met up at an event, like a music event, a festival called Spring Fest, and I piggytailed DD 420 on that. So this float is like 10 of those guys that met up there are meeting up here in Missouri from all over the nation. We got Scooter here came in from Washington State. We got two guys coming from South Carolina. So that's coast to coast. A guy from Pennsylvania, Doc Ray's coming from Virginia, and then myself and a couple other guys from here in Missouri. And we're gonna do the campfire. We're gonna eat. We're gonna do some cannabis ceremonies. We'll do other um, original healing, but together around a fire by the river, a little kayaking, but complete camaraderie in a safe space. Whereas you had talked about before, people would be drinking or listen to the Five Finger Death Punch, and it's not like that. It's not like that at all. It's a place where people can talk about what they're finding that really works for them, and surrounding themselves with people who'll be not only honest with them but help them maintain accountability to be their best self, but knowing that they have each other as a group, and anytime they ever needed to talk, they could reach out to the group, you know? So there's
yeah.
tons of healing power around that, and that's how our native ancestors have been doing this for thousands of years. They're not doing it in a clinic. They're not doing it in the lights. They're doing it barefoot outside around a fire together. I've even experienced tribes that would take in veterans who are, they're on the pills and they're on the alcohol, they're doing the opioids and drinking, and the first thing they do is they clean them up. They clean up their diet, and they get them to stop, and they don't use any pharmaceuticals. It's all natural resources from the land that they use to get them clean. And so, what you guys are doing, I love hearing about that. I love hearing that you're doing the same thing across the pond that we're doing over here. And veterans are helping veterans. That's what it's about. At the end of the day, we might not get the best care from our VA clinics, our doctors, but we're finding the veterans that will help other veterans. So I love hearing that's global as well.
Yeah, and you find that there are people in the system that are fantastic. It's just a shame that they're fighting against the system. Like I say, my psychologist was great, and I've met some other people that are great, but it's just the system's broken, and it's when you're screaming against it and you're already broken yourself. It's such a shame, and when you've given so much to it, it's another sort of moral injury. Yeah, and that's another thing that it's another thing that they're calling like closer to PTSD now, calling it moral injury and injury to the soul, and I think that is a closer sort of description of it. It's all just language.
Johnny, I think that we got to be careful with that at the end of the day. How many times have we changed PTSD? If you think about it, it goes back from shell shock to, I mean, they just keep changing the name. George Carlin talked about this as a comedian in the names that matters. That matters. It really
Yeah.
does. But I
But
think,
they've
go
been
ahead.
talking about injuries to the soul since like the Middle Ages, and you talk about like 12th, 13th century monks treating knights with sort of these injuries to the soul after the Crusades, and they treat them with the same things that we're now treating PTSD with. So, yeah, I think uh, I get what you mean. I think if people recognise it, we've finally got it recognised. Let's keep it as it is. That the masses are finally recognising it. Then yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Well, Johnny, I think that it's conversations like this and more veterans uniting, not just in our respective countries, but globally, like we're doing. The more veterans that we get talking about this and how they genuinely found healing, not just coping mechanisms, not just band aid fixes, but genuine healing and groups of people that are helping them maintain accountability, groups of people that are holding space for one another and being honest. Um, that's how we make the change. The more people we talk, that's the importance of sharing out these lives. That's the importance of you sitting down with me today and telling your story, because so many people aren't. So many people are just going, "Oh, get better? Okay, I'm better," and then moving on because fuck it. I know somebody else who had it worse off than me or experienced something worse, and then just pack it up and move on, like you talked about, like you ended your career doing. So thank you for sharing your story with us today. I'm super grateful to have you on. And as we wrap up, can you tell our listeners if they're looking for you or want to know more or how they can help, where they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm on all Facebook and Instagram. I'm Shed Heron on there. That's my army nickname. Yeah,
Where'd that
because I
come
look like
from?
a shit Ed Sheeran. Yeah, I was at a Remembrance Sunday doing uniform, and an old boy came walking towards me and a group of my mates, and we're like, "Here we go." It's going to be like, "Oh, back in my day," and he just walked up towards us a bit pissed and went, "You look like that Shed Heron," and then walked off. So I've just been
Oh, man.
called Shed ever since. It's my road name at the bike club, and yeah, just Shed.
That's
So I'm
hilarious.
Shed Heron on all that stuff. So you can find me on there. Campfire Collective are on Facebook as well. The Campfire Collective. They've got red and black sort of emblem. You can't miss it. And Emerald Health UK are the clinic. If you're in the UK and you need veteran, you're a veteran, well, or even if you're not a veteran, come on to Emerald Health. They are honestly an absolutely fantastic caring clinic. They're a clinic that actually give a shit, which is why I'm working with them. Also, just like to give a shout out to Big Foz in the UK, which is another veteran who's doing cannabis stuff as well. He's a great guy.
Right on. Well, I appreciate it. So that was Emerald Health Clinic. So what's the website one more time?
It's Emerald Health Clinic. That's it, Emerald Health Clinic.
.uk or
.co.uk.
Okay. .co.uk. Well, thank you again, Jonathan. I appreciate you. I'm super grateful for you for sharing your story, and how you found healing, and especially what you're doing and continuing to do there. That's huge because so many veterans don't know where to turn when they get out. So when they hear like a familiar voice like yourself, and then you've got a team of doctors and all of that put together, is just an amazing resource to get veterans educated on this, because there's not a lot of resources in real life on this as you're getting out of the service. And there's still this huge stigma tied to it. I know, especially where you're at, here in the States, veterans still, they sign that page 13, they take your analysis randomly, and at least for sure annually. So they promise they're not going to do it, and they're tested on it. So it's big no here. And I know it's the same for you guys.
So veterans can't do it?
Not at all. No, not on active service. Not until they
active not active. Yeah, active service you can't. No, I thought you said veterans couldn't do it. I was like, geez.
Active duty veterans cannot. Now, retired veterans, they reach out all the time, and I hope they continue to. I love hearing that. All right, Johnny, I'm going to put you backstage. I'll be right back for you. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate you. Wow, another good one. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your service, and your journey towards healing, and all that you continue to do. And thank you so much for everybody watching and listening. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. This is exactly the reason I created this podcast, to give veterans a platform to tell their stories, not just about what happened during uniform, but what happened after they took it off. These struggles, these battles, the breakthroughs, and the different paths veterans are discovering on their journeys towards healing. The veteran suicide crisis is global. We're proof of that here. We talk about this all the time on the show. It doesn't stop at our borders. And neither should our efforts to help one another. Different countries, different uniforms, different experiences. Veterans around the world are coming together through community, nature, around the campfire, like Johnny's talking about, and through medicines that have been used by people for generations, long before modern pharmaceuticals were ever even thought of. And that's a conversation I think it's worth having. If this episode connected with you, please like, subscribe, comment, and share this episode out. Your engagement helps these stories reach more veterans and can put this conversation in front of someone who desperately needs to hear about it. And if you want more veteran stories, education, and conversations about breaking stigmas, please visit my website, www.420chief.net. Till next time, keep telling your stories. Keep looking out for your brothers and sisters, and keep breaking the stigmas. Different countries, different uniforms, one veteran family. Lead with love, lead with change. Chief out.